Hello, welcome to Chapter 9, and today we're going to be talking about marketing on photo sharing sites. Hopefully, a lot of you have been exposed to photos on the internet and the different sites where you might get photos, and so we just want to add what it means to use photos from a marketing perspective and make you aware of some sites that you may not have been aware of. So an outline for this chapter would be the following. We're going to look at brief history of photo sharing. What are some benefits of using just photos and other images for your marketing campaign? What do you need to do if you want to build your own personal brand? And then how do you go about marketing that through these photo sharing sites? And then lastly, we'll look at best practices for using your photos to do marketing with. So to give you a little background on photo marketing or video marketing, and so you need to understand that with social media, people have been more involved and more consuming of content that has photos in it. And so you can see how the big social media apps have been purchasing other apps that concentrated on photo sharing. So here you have Google that's concentrating with Google Plus for doing photo sharing. Facebook bought Instagram, and Salesforce, when it's doing business to business type marketing, integrated Instagram in the form of their social studio. And so there's lots of pictures that's being transmitted on the internet. It's what the new generation of students, clients are looking for. That's the way they communicate. And so by using photos as well, that you're getting into their area in terms of being able to market toward them. Along these related lines, we also have something that has contributed to the use of photos, and that's the use of smartphones. And so you can see at the time of this book, smartphones were 1 in 2 people in the U.S. have smartphones. I think I recently saw an article that says over 90% of us have a smartphone. And so it's grown rapidly. And with those smartphones, there are cameras on there. And it seems like every time they come out with a new type of smartphone, that it gets better and better cameras. I think the current versions might even have 2 cameras listed on them. And so again, it's more geared toward people taking more photos of capturing things in their lives. And that's what people want to see. And so the research has shown that when you use photos in your presentations, that people are more likely to respond to that. And so if you're doing some kind of marketing and you want to engage with the community that's looking at that, include a photo, and that'll help engage them more and help them respond more. And you can see how this is borne out in this graph here. We have the types of engagement types across Facebook posts, content types. You can see that if it's a link, does it generate a comment, a share, or a like? Same thing with photos. Same thing with your status. Apparently that generates more comments. And then you've got videos, and then overall how that appears. And so like I was saying from that previous graph, then the Facebook status updates get the greatest number of comments, and then that gets the highest engagement score. So if you're getting people to look at the comments and then add something back. We got videos, also encourage the shares. And so if you're on Facebook, do you want to share something with that? The photos also encourage people to hit a like button. And so it's good to have good content to engage your audience, but you can also help that if you think about using a good image to go along with that. The next thing I want to talk about is some different terminology. One is something called image hosting site, and this is where you can store pictures from your different devices, whether it's an iPad or some kind of laptop or your camera that's on your phone, and then you can download them again and print them out. Now, sometimes the image hosting site, it might just be the cloud, and so you could store all your pictures in the cloud, and then later on you could retrieve them from a different device and then print them out. But you're not actually sharing anything with anybody else from a hosting site. So it's whether the hosting site is specifically designed for images, or it's the cloud of some type. And then if you're on an Apple device, it's called the iCloud. So then there's this photo sharing site that lets you upload photos, and then you can then share those photos with making them public. That means anybody that finds the URL can see them, or you can make it private. So someone would have to have a password in order to get into that website in order to see it. So Google has a picture sharing site that you can make public or private and share things with other people. So when you upload a group of pictures and you want to keep them together, you could create an album or a gallery of some type. And the nice thing about that is that it gives you a way to manage those and then make them available to people who want to see specific events, and then all the pictures in that album or gallery would be associated with that event. Your book talks about, the images could be sorted by topic and tagged with keywords, and that means that whoever's doing that and making that available would have to make that file list structure available, and then you would be able to see that. And so I'm going to show you here shortly how that is done if you need to do that. So here I've gone to a folder on my hard drive. It's called Pictures, and then Camera Roll. There's one or two images in there. Not the best in the world. If I go to a different way of viewing those, I can click on that and I should be able to get a listing. So here, see at the top are some attribute names of this. I can, if I click here, you can see I got different tags, and so if I go to the tag field, I could put some information in there. I could also click on this and it would give me that information. And so that's the type of tags that your book is talking about. So if I scroll over, you can see. So there's not particularly any tag here. I might be able to edit that and put some information in there. So notice that when I click on the image, I could come over here to the side here, and I could put in, say, office image. And so what you want to be able to do is put in tags that people might, and information that people might want to search on. So I've got a tag there. I might also want to put in a subject matter is faculty image. I just need to be consistent so people would know. And so here I have another image, and I could put in too dark. And I just did that, but notice here when I click at the top, that's going to sort this, the list of images that are inside of this directory. And so you can see, if I scroll over, now it put it in alphabetical order. And so that's what your book is talking about in terms of, the images could be sorted by topic, tagged, or with keywords. And so somebody's going to have to spend the time to put that information in there, but you want to be consistent so that when people do a sort, they can find the information. So if you were doing this for an organization that was having images, you want to be sure you have a list of keywords that you use for all your images. That way, when people were looking for certain things, they could actually search on that particular field and find what they're looking for. So as we look at this next image, you can see what your book lists as the most popular photo sharing sites. And so I would say they're probably still, Instagram's probably still number one. IMGUR, some of these you may have heard of, some of them you may not have heard of. The book does a good job of talking about some of them and how they got started and how some of them became even more popular while others, their popularity diminished. So just to make you aware of what's available out there, if you're going to use some kind of photo sharing site, I would look and see who has the best features that you might be looking for. I know in the past when I've done some consulting, the client wanted to be able to create albums, to be able to share it among multiple people in the office so they could add or delete photos to it. And so Google Plus actually, or not Google Plus, but the Google Photos is what worked for them, and it creates a nice way to create an album, and you can download some software on your local computer to make edits to those pictures, then create them into albums, and then upload the entire album at once instead of individual pictures. And then you can make them who you want to share them with. Now, your book does a really good job of showing the importance of who has ownership of an image. And so when you go out onto the internet and you're looking at an image and you decide, oh, I'd like to have that image on my site or in my content somewhere, be very careful about who owns that image and what you're allowed to do with that. And so here we have a picture of a baboon, looks like, that took their own picture. Well, the question is who owns the picture? If a photographer didn't take it, then they don't own it. And so then they can't give copyright to somebody else in order to use that. And so the ownership of an image, you need to be very sure about who owns that. And so we look for copyright protection, and that's good for you, and it's also good for the person who owns it. And if you're the one that owns it, it protects you in some way. So it deals with holders of the photos, any kind of artwork, and then you can give access to somebody to use your art or your photos without any kind of fee. Right? So just be sure you're checking who has the ownership of that and what the copyright policy is on a particular photo that you find on a photo sharing site. A lot of times, if you go to a photo sharing site, they will embed some text over the image so that if you were to download it and use it, it would actually say the name, or it would say copyrighted over it, so that you can't just have free reign of using that image. So basically, when you take an image, you own that. And so it applies to the taker of the photo. Again, I would stress, make sure you get permission to use anybody's photo that you find on the internet. And that's not just to give them, if you use it on a website, just to say, well, I got this from this website, and that's the end of it. No, you need to specifically get their permission. So continuing along with that, we want to think about what should you consider before you post an image, right? So one thing is, do you understand the term fair use? Now, in education, a lot of times educators will borrow things off the internet and claim fair use. And so there's some specific things about fair use. So you can't just think just because you have an attribution, that is, you said where you got it, or a link back to the original site, does that mean it's free and clear? And what it means is that if you're using it for educational purposes, you can only use, say, a video, a portion of the video. You can't just use the entire video. And so if you are just grabbing it and give attribution back, you still may be violating something with plagiarism, but that's not the same thing as copyright. So when we think about fair use, you can use it for the purposes of criticizing, doing some kind of comment, some kind of news reporting. We mentioned teaching, scholarship, research, right? Then it falls into that fair use. But I would, spend a little time and make sure that you're using that image appropriately. Another question to ask yourself is, have you transformed the image in some way that it doesn't look like the original image at all? If that's the case, then you're more than likely not to have infringed on the copyright. Another question to ask yourself is, how much of the image are you using? If you're just using a small picture of it or a thumbnail and linking it back to the original location, wherever you found it, then you're more than likely to be using it under the fair use than if you just grabbed the entire image and posted it in your site. And then 5, if you do use something, are you willing to risk your site being taken down? Right? So you may be getting a cease and desist from the digital media people, or you might get sued, and so a lawyer may send you a letter saying you don't own the rights to this, and if you don't take it down immediately, we're going to sue you, or they may just go ahead and start the litigation process. So the next thing I want to talk about is just a little history of photo sharing. So around the time that the internet becomes commercial, then you have sites like web shops that opens the first video sharing. By 4 years later, it's morphed into some kind of social network. And a year later after that, it's one of the most popular photo sharing destinations online where people go and use that. So in the late 90s, 1990s, then you have other sites that are being formed. 2 popular ones that came out of that era, PhotoBucket and Flickr. So by 2004, it originally started as an online multiplayer gaming site, and so it used its interface to do photo sharing. And so, you may have sites out there that are very popular or not so popular, but the interface and the technology that they've developed lends itself well towards using it for photos. And so you can see that for Google. Google Plus wanted to get into photo sharing, and so they've got the Google Photo, and that's being used, but now you see that Google's now using their Google Drive, and they're going to branch that out into 2 different kinds of areas, one specifically for photos, the other one to mimic your hard drive, but also in the cloud. And so hopefully in the future, when you use Google Drive, one of the options you can use it for is just like a remote drive. You'll be able to send and retrieve files directly to the drive, and use it just like a local drive. But that won't be the same as it's being currently used, which is backup and sync. So getting back to the history here, we see that with Flickr, it was acquired by Yahoo in 2005. By 2008, they didn't like the original founders, didn't like what Yahoo was doing with it or how it was going, and so they resigned. People have used it for, I guess you see here by 2009, It's starting to be used by the people that work in government to store White House photos. And so you can see how it's kind of exponentially grown, with the number of photos that have been put onto that site. So 6 billion photos have been uploaded. That doesn't even, the amount of photos and the amount of content that's being generated, special video and images, is just astronomical. And so the same path goes for Photo Bucket, right? Um, and they had some problems in terms of not being able to provide enough free storage. And so I think that's a way that these photo sharing sites are going to make their money, is they allow you to use so much, but then after you use that space up, they're going to start charging you for the space. And disk space currently is relatively cheap. The problem is, once you've got 20 years worth of photos out there, it's not something that you're going to download easily. They decide to change or charge higher prices, then you may be at the mercy of those companies in order to have to pay the higher costs. And so with PhotoBucket, you can see, they're actually offering that 2 gigs of free storage, and then they offer the premium plans if you need more in order to pay for that. I'd just be leery about going with a new company who hasn't proven themselves. You don't know how long those companies are going to stay in business, and then what happens to your photos, your content, if something goes wrong, right? So continuing on, we have Instagram, which is popular with a younger consumer these days. So it started in 2010. Then 2 years later, it's purchased by Facebook. And then Facebook uses that to generate more revenue by launching something with sponsored photos and videos. And so people that are using that, or organizations that are using that, include Starbucks, Target, and Mercedes. So by the time this book was written, October 15, Instagram had about 400 million users worldwide, and it made up about 10% of Facebook's revenue. And so that's increasing, and you're going to see more and more use of videos and photos. Then you have another social media site that's primarily just photos, is Pinterest. And Pinterest started around 2010 as well. And by October 15, it had about 100 million global users. And so the things we've talked about Pinterest is mostly used by women. It doesn't have as many followers, but 100 million users is still a pretty good size amount. So if you want to look at the demographics of each of these different sites, Instagram versus Pinterest, we've got women, teens under 30 is the primary audience for Instagram. Same thing for Pinterest in terms of its primary audience is women, people that are into different types of food, and crafters. What they're looking for, it's best used for. Again, if you're going to run those social media campaigns, you should understand what those apps have targeted and what type of demographics or type of people that are using those. If that falls into what you're targeting, then this is the type of app you should be using. The next site we want to look at is probably IMGUR. GUR. And so you can see it's specifically for different types of images. So, and they've grouped things, and so images that are popular on the internet. And you can click on those and find more images. So when we look at that, it was founded in 2009. By 2015, it had about 150 million unique users each month. And so again, it's another site that people are using for images. It's also been used by eBay. And so you can see how a promoted post might be using the images, and you can see how they've incorporated this cat. So moving on to thinking about, okay, I know I should use images, but why and how should I use these images? And so the benefits of marketing with these photos and images is, one, it's going to help you showcase a product. You know, they say an image is worth, or a picture is worth 1,000 words. It could be more. And so it's going to, you can describe something, but until somebody sees it, they're not going to be able to really understand what it looks like and how it might be used and help them. It's going to be used, if we look at the second item here, it'll help you reinforce your brand image. Because people see an image and say, oh, I'd like to see more of that, or expand that out more and see if they have any other pictures. So it might help drive web traffic to your site. And so in your ads, when you're posting them, say in AdWords or AdSense, something that's coming up on your site, that's going to help drive, if the image is good, drive people to go find out some more. It's also going to help create awareness and encourage sharing. And so if you got a unique way of using your product, then people might share that image, and that'll drive more conversation, more word of mouth. And so it'll help you leverage opportunities to market that product, and it's very low cost. All you have to do is come up with a picture or several pictures. Think about those of you that have bought shoes. If you go to Zappos, you can watch the images of Zappos, and they actually have, the shoes, and then the different um, views of the different shoes. But you could also click on a video, and somebody comes out wearing the shoes, and they talk about the shoes, and they show it from different angles and stuff. Again, that it falls in line with all the different things that you have here. And so if you've ever bought anything from Amazon, they do this exact same thing. When you click on an Amazon product, they have different images of that product. Again, it's helping you do all these things here. Now you can also use your images and pictures to build your own personal brand. Every time you're sharing your own photos and everything you're doing out there on Facebook or Instagram without thinking too much about it, you're building your own brand. And you have to think about it. Is this the brand that I really want to portray to everybody who might be seeing this? So when you're thinking about the photos you're putting out there, think about having a strategy and what that means to your own professional goals, your way of branding yourself. So, if I wanted to come across as an expert, then the images of myself all the time would lend themselves to be more of what the people's perception of an expert would look like and be doing. And so those are the sort of things you need to keep in mind. Right? So, keep the pictures that you're generating linked to your professional brand, but you don't want to be too stuffy about it. Have some fun with it. Think about showing pictures that show you doing stuff, not just sitting there and not doing anything and not being very involved, because that becomes your brand. Then the brand might be that person that does those sort of things would be considered lazy, and that if I'm looking to hire somebody like that, I really wouldn't want to be doing things like that. You don't want to overshare and put that image out there. People then get tired of seeing that and don't want to have anything to do with you. And so if you got things on Facebook where they're putting up those random ads and your ad keeps coming up a lot, people will unfriend you, or say this ad's not relevant, or I don't want to see anything else like this, and so on. Right? So if we look at the next figure, you can see something that's focusing on engagement. And so these people are doing different things. This is a Halloween garb. And so it is, People like seeing that and see what's going on. And so, in terms of their personal brand, what is that showing? Maybe that they're engaged, they like to have fun at work, so on. So when you're getting ready to do your marketing and you're going to do photos, then you think about, okay, I'm going to do a photo sharing site. So think about, who your target market's going to be. Think about the photos that are going to be appropriate for that market, and you go ahead and upload those. And so those photos that you're using should help you demonstrate either some knowledge or involve users, but you absolutely do not want to put them out there to do a sell or a hard sell. And then with that, you want to also come up with some content to go with that, and make sure that you've got the correct permissions for all the photos that you're using. So if you took your own photos, you're good. If you're using somebody else's, make sure you've got those permissions, or you could get into copyright problems. And the last thing we want to talk about for this chapter are the best practices in marketing for photo sharing. So you've got your photos. You need to think about your brand story, your target market, and what is it that you want to try and accomplish, and then how are you going to measure if you've been successful or not. Right? So you want to look at benchmarking yourself against others in your brand category. What are they doing? How are they being successful? You then want to optimize your content by not posting the same content the same way on every site. So if you see others are doing it a certain way all the time, try to do something different. Otherwise, the user sees that and they kind of ignore it because they've been exposed to that way of seeing something a lot, and you're going to miss out, right? And so when you're doing this photo sharing, realize that the customer is the center of your efforts. That's who you're doing it for. What would they like to see? How would they like to see it? How would it engage them? So looking at number 5 here, you just don't want to display products. You want to try and show them how they might be used or how they are being used. For sharing your own photos, make sure the images kind of express your own brand's personality. So you need to define what is it that you want your brand personality to be. When we look at the major platforms for photo sharing, make sure you use them to your advantage by knowing who are the demographics. What are the demographics of each of those sites and how are they best used for? Right? With that, you also want to identify and find those people that are brand influencers and make sure they can try and get them involved. As you're doing this, you always need to be measuring and seeing how well you're doing. So you need to define what is it that's going to say I'm doing a good job, it's been successful, and then if it's not, you might need to change. And if you're having people respond and engage with those photos, then you need to be watching out for that and make sure that you follow up and respond to those people. One of the worst things you do is throw up a picture and not come back to the site for, say, 6 months. And you got all these posts and nobody has responded to them, nobody's engaged with those people. Well, guess what? All those people that were trying to form a conversation and have some interaction with you on your site are no longer going to engage with you. They're gone. They just think nobody cares, and you've lost that opportunity. So you need to be able to watch where you're putting those pictures, allow people to interact and respond to them. And that ends this chapter on photo sharing.